Hey everyone, I'm Kevin Gosztola. I'm the editor of the Dissenter newsletter and the host of the Dissenter Weekly, a show that's a part of this newsletter that is focused on whistleblowers, on press freedom, and government secrecy. So welcome to this week's show. It's the seventh episode of Dissenter Weekly, the seventh edition. And if you're unfamiliar with the show, I encourage you to become a subscriber of the Dissenter. All you have to do is go to thedissenter.org. And at the Dissenter, you can support this independent journalism, which I think is very crucial at this moment. And it relates to and involves a lot of the issues that you'll be hearing about today as I go through the headlines and then as we get to the main story at the end of the show. And then if you're not willing to subscribe, but you appreciate what we do, maybe you can chip in a few dollars and go to thedissenter.org/donate, thedissenter.org/donate. That's an easy way to just give a little bit, but not make any long-term commitments to the newsletter. So with that, let's get to the headlines that we have. Fired U.S. whistleblower agency chief has given up his legal battle and was going through the courts trying to have his position restored after President Donald Trump's administration fired him from the position. This involves the agency chief, who is known as Hampton Dellinger, did a show a little bit ago, a few weeks ago, that was on this lesser known agency called the Office of the Special Counsel. He's the Office of the Special Counsel chief and was fired. This is an agency that was protected by Congress under the Whistleblower Protection Act of 1989. There were several whistleblower groups that looked at this as a critical case involving executive power and whether whistleblowers could have any kind of protection under the Trump administration. And it didn't go the way they had hoped. But as they asked for and advocated for this chief, for Dellinger, they reminded the courts that the Carter administration had actually retaliated against so-called politically disfavored whistleblowers. The OSC, this Office of Special Counsel, was vested with the ability to assure whistleblowers that they would be protected and their claims of waste, fraud, abuse, or illegality would be investigated. So in the late 80s, there was a movement to protect these whistleblowers from the type of retaliation that they had seen in past years. And now, with this firing, you had an appeals court come out and issue a decision that did not protect him from removal any longer. And the chief effectively became an at-will employee, which would mean that the OSC chief serves political interests over public interests. It makes it harder to be nonpartisan in the way that you carry out your activities on behalf of whistleblowers. Days before Dellinger gave up this fight, he actually had some success and convinced a government panel known as the Merit Systems Protection Board, or the MSPB, to restore 5,000 employees to the U.S. Department of Agriculture that had been fired en masse. He stood up for thousands upon thousands of employees that were terminated because they were probationary employees. Probationary employees are a group of employees that have been with an agency for less than a year. And so that is in particular what the Department of Government Efficiency, started by Musk and company, that they've been targeting particularly these employees that haven't been there as long at these agencies. And so there was a panel that returned those employees to their jobs. Now, with Dellinger giving up this battle, the Project on Government Oversight highlighted the fact that Veterans Affairs Secretary Doug Collins will likely be running this watchdog office. That's a big deal because he is also the lead chief. He runs the Department of Veteran Affairs. And so now he has a conflict of interest. There are several hundred whistleblower cases that the Office of Special Counsel has before it, which come out of the Veterans Affairs Department. POGO, or the Project on Government Oversight, pointed out that if Collins is in charge, it'll mean that protecting the identities of confidential VA whistleblowers will be that much more challenging. And in fact, during Donald Trump's first term, there was an aide close to the then VA secretary who allegedly sought to learn the identities of VA whistleblowers from a different office that reported directly to the secretary. That was something that the Project on Government Oversight, or POGO, revealed in 2020. Hampton Dellinger went on MSNBC. It was on Rachel Maddow's show. And so let's play a clip of him discussing why he decided to no longer pursue this battle in the courts.
You fought for a solid month since that happened. Your case took one trip to the Supreme Court already, back down to lower courts. You got an adverse appeals court ruling yesterday, which led to your decision to effectively stop your fight. Did you feel like you had no choice in terms of stopping it, that there might be additional harm done to the things that you care about and that you were trying to protect if you stuck with it and kept fighting?
Certainly that was an aspect of it. I had a 3-judge panel that was somewhat conservative, and that mirrors the Supreme Court. So I knew that could be an uphill fight, even though I disagree with the court's ruling, and I would disagree with the Supreme Court if they found my position unconstitutional. But the other issue, Rachel, is it was going to be months, maybe a year before I'd get a final answer. I'd be on the sidelines the whole time. And I've seen the damage over the past month or so that can happen in days, sometimes even hours, to these federal agencies when the laws aren't being followed. And so the idea of trying to come back in a year and fix what I think might be broken forever in terms of the independence of my agency was not something that I thought I could do.
That was Hampton Dellinger describing why he ended his battle to be restored as chief of the Office of Special Counsel. Now, my brief commentary is that it would seem, if it is unconstitutional for the Supreme Court to remove someone like him from this position because Congress intended for this agency that doesn't have a whole lot of authority in the executive branch, but is in a limited manner able to accept cases from whistleblowers and stand up for them by following up on the tips that they receive related to alleged instances of waste, fraud, and abuse. It would seem that it would be worth it to continue to take a stand, even if the risk is that the Supreme Court would rule it unconstitutional. Just ending it at this juncture doesn't resolve anything. In fact, it probably amps up the ability of the Trump White House to intimidate those who work at this agency, to continue to go after any kind of like watchdog officials who believe that they should be able to conduct their business without interference from the White House. The Office of Special Counsel now will be run by somebody who either, at some point, maybe they put an independent chief who isn't also running a cabinet office in charge. If they don't, then that's quite a conundrum. But then also you have the possibility that somebody who will be installed into that position by the White House will now do the bidding of Donald Trump and all of the different people who are Trump administration officials serving those interests, certainly being careful not to cross the corporate and special interests of those officials. And so then that means there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of cases that are withdrawn. The OSC has a significant backlog of cases, and it could be sold to the American people as a kind of success to just get rid of those cases and no longer follow them up, and then to claim that they're potentially frivolous or trivial complaints that have been put forward by whistleblowers under Joe Biden and then going all the way back to Donald Trump. And there are probably even still pending cases from the era of President Barack Obama, believe it or not, owed to the lack of funding, owed to some of the dysfunction, and dare I say it, inefficiency at the Office of Special Counsel. But that inefficiency isn't because it can't work as an agency. It's because it's not given enough resources and staff to follow up on these complaints from whistleblowers. The next story is that a USAID whistleblower faces retaliation after warning of mass deaths. This Nicholas Enrich was placed on administrative leave. That's a classic form of retaliation after blowing the whistle on the impact of suspending foreign aid and, quote, life-saving humanitarian assistance, end quote, to countries where malaria, Ebola, and the bird flu could spread and eventually have dire impacts in the United States. CNN obtained a March 4th memo that projected 71,000 to 166,000 deaths could occur from malaria. Highly pathogenic avian influenza, that would be the bird flu, could cost the U.S. at least $14 trillion. By suspending maternal and child health programs, at least 1 million children could suffer from severe acute malnutrition. The New York Times additionally reported that 200,000 children could be paralyzed by polio annually. These are all warnings coming from this whistleblower. Trump-aligned media outlets like Breitbart responded with a desperate attempt to kill the messenger by pointing out that Enrich had potentially donated a whopping $400 to Democrats over the past several years. The next story is that Atlanta Inspector General office staff seek whistleblower protection and an investigation by the Justice Department. 5 staffers working in Atlanta's Office of the Inspector General asked state and U.S. Justice Department prosecutors to investigate alleged corruption by high-ranking city officials. They sent a letter to the Atlanta U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr, and Georgia Inspector General Nigel Lang. Atlanta Civic Circle obtained a copy of the letter. Allegations against city officials involve a complaint of allegedly improper $500,000 city council donation to a group trying to secure Atlanta's bid for the 2024 DNC, saying that the city code only allows donations to charity nonprofits. Another complaint allegedly involves cronyism, with campaign contributors being rewarded with city jobs, contracts, or donations to nonprofits. Next, Maryland Attorney General proposes a bill that would allow lawsuits against record requesters. Maryland's Attorney General Anthony Brown proposed state legislation in February that would change the Maryland Public Information Act so that the government could sue citizens for filing what they considered to be frivolous or vexatious records requests. According to the Baltimore Sun, a person, especially repeat requesters, could even be banned from receiving documents. Lauren Harper, the Daniel Ellsberg Chair on Government Secrecy for the Freedom of the Press Foundation, said that the proposal, quote, runs afoul of the First Amendment, end quote. And if an agency has too much of a backlog of requests, perhaps that agency should, quote, proactively post more information, end quote. The Trump administration fired the FOIA oversight chief. The Guardian reported that Bobak Talibian, the head of the U.S. Justice Department Office of Information Policy, was fired by Trump officials. So here's another agency that maybe you didn't know existed in government. We're learning about these different smaller agencies that do have some valuable role to play potentially if they have funding and staff. And we've heard about the Office of Special Counsel. There's the Merit Systems Protection Board. These are agencies to protect workers. And now this is the Office of Information Policy, in charge of overseeing government-wide compliance with the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. Thrown into further disarray. It's not like it was already being resourced in a manner that could effectively look at the way agencies handle FOIA requests, but you throw out the person in charge and it becomes that much more of a struggle to have a government that handles your FOIA requests the way that officials should. For our main story this week, we turn to ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the raids that are being carried out against undocumented migrants throughout the United States. And particularly, we focus on the leaks that are coming from within ICE and the Department of Homeland Security and other agencies that might be privy to information about raids, where there are sources that are speaking to journalists, reporters throughout the country and tipping them off, it would seem, to raids that are coming. Sharing this information for whatever motivation or purpose they might have to share this information. And it has enraged the Trump administration, enraged the most anti-immigrant parts of the administration, officials who are in charge of this policy. We heard in the last week that Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, former governor of South Dakota, referred for prosecution at least 2 individuals to the Justice Department and would like them to be charged with crimes for being sources, alleged sources of reports on ICE raids. Here's Kristi Noem.
Everyone, I wanted to give you a quick update. We have identified 2 leakers of information here at the Department of Homeland Security who have been telling individuals about our operations and putting law enforcement lives in jeopardy. We plan to prosecute these 2 individuals and hold them accountable for what they've done. And we're going to continue to do all that we can to keep America safe.
That was Kristi Noem mentioning that 2 individuals were referred to the Justice Department for prosecution. And we don't know, we have no idea what particularly they leaked at this moment, but we'll get to what it might involve potentially. But first, what could these individuals be prosecuted for doing? It's unlikely that they would be prosecuted under the Espionage Act, and we haven't seen anyone put that forward as an option. So we wouldn't be talking about your typical national security leak prosecution that I've spent the last 15 years covering. I don't actually remember ever reporting on an investigation of somebody for a leak from ICE. But what the administration would like to do is go after these people in order to make an example out of one person or a few individuals in order to tighten everything up and make sure that reporters stop obtaining information about these raids ahead of time. So Laura Rees, director of the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation, told a media organization called the Washington Stand that those who leaked details of ICE raids should be prosecuted, and then further explained that they are, in Laura's mind, obstructing justice, and named the statute that they were violating, and then also obstructing a federal proceeding. Leakers and doctors have not been punished the last several years, so they view their obstruction as low risk, high reward. We need very public examples made of some to halt the behavior. Firing is not enough because they will be quickly rehired by leftist organizations. They should be publicly arrested, prosecuted, fired, have their security clearance revoked, any federal retirement revoked, and be barred from future government employment and government grants and contracts. So let's go all out and attack these individuals, destroy their lives. It would effectively be like bringing the sledgehammer down with an Espionage Act prosecution. All of what is described there is in effect what happens to somebody who's prosecuted under the Espionage Act. But let's use these statutes for obstructing justice and obstructing the federal government, and let's really hammer away at anybody who is talking to the press. A clear attack on freedom of the press in the United States by Kristi Noem and Homeland Security, and then the Justice Department. Anybody else who's advocating for this is not somebody who you can trust actually values the news reporting, journalism, and the freedom to share this information with people in the public. So this might relate to a 24/7 news cycle that was fueled by Fox News on March 3rd. And it all focused in and around a reporter. And they're a reporter. No matter what these people at Fox News claim, they were engaged in journalism and have been a lifelong reporter. The person's name is Pablo Manriquez. Pablo Manriquez has a Substack or a newsletter called Migrant Insider and works with at least one other person. Pablo Manriquez, as I have the notes in front of me, came from the Texas Monthly, Vanity Fair, New Republic, Center for Investigative Reporting, has a last 10 years, has been doing journalism. For a couple of years, 2014 to 2016, Pablo was part of the Democratic National Committee, worked for a couple of years as their Hispanic media director. But before that, mind you, was a Fox News media correspondent from 2012 to 2015. And so now you have Pablo on, particularly on Twitter, was posting that there were these raids that he had learned about. He was tipped off for these raids. He was sharing where they would take place and issuing warnings. We'll hear about it. I want to play you this clip first. This is a clip from Laura Ingraham and her show, The Ingraham Angle. Laura Ingraham has on this program Bill Malushin, and I'm not just clearing my throat, that's his last name. And this is definitely somebody who would not hesitate to ask an ICE patrol officer for a selfie while they were manhandling a migrant. He would put that on his X profile so that everyone could see this header that he was able to get. And so you'll hear from Laura, and then you hear Bill urge and agitate for prosecuting not just the leakers, but also going after this reporter, Pablo Manriquez.
Child rapist, if you beat up women for fun or steal cars, or maybe you simply terrorize people as a gang member, and you happen to live in Northern Virginia, well, you're probably resting easy tonight. Because thanks to the self-proclaimed migrant reporter Pablo Manriquez, you know exactly where ICE will be conducting its raids. He somehow got info about pending ICE operations and has been blasting out the information, telling illegals to plan accordingly. Joining me now, Fox News national correspondent Bill Malushin. Bill, now this looks like a leak from DHS. What do we know?
Laura, it was a leak, and it was leaked to not a reporter, but a far-left open borders activist who doesn't like ICE and doesn't want ICE to succeed. And he's trying to say that he's just reporting the news. No, he's not. He went well beyond that. If you guys pull up his string of tweets, not only did he give these targets a heads up that this was coming, he then said ICE has warrants. They can go into your home. So, quote, plan accordingly. He then went on to say that the highways aren't safe. Stay off the highways because state police are partnering with ICE. That crosses the line from reporting into activism. And here's why it's so egregious in this case, Laura. He openly says in his reporting there that ICE had up to 100 judicial warrants to go after these guys. That means a judge had signed off on these criminal warrants and given ICE the green light to go after them. That means there's a higher degree of criminality. These are not just administrative ICE arrests. These are criminals, they're fugitives, they're people with final orders of removal, and ICE had judicial permission to target them and go after them. Well, this activist has apparently decided to align himself with those criminal aliens, give them a heads up, and then coach them and advise them on how to avoid ICE. And Laura, you and I may find that abhorrent, but the real blame here goes with whoever leaked him that information. Because the big question right now is who in this Trump administration is talking to a far left, ICE-hating activist, immigration reporter, as he describes himself, and is leaking these operational details to him because his information was accurate, Laura. I confirmed with ICE sources there were operations in Virginia today. So look, a lot of people in the Trump administration have been going on TV saying that these leakers are going to be punished, they're going to be identified, there are going to be consequences. But we haven't seen any of that yet, right? Aurora leaked, Chicago leaked, LA leaked, now Virginia leaked. It seems to be getting worse and worse. We may not like what this activist is reporting, but the true blame goes to whoever is leaking that information to him and giving up the ICE intel.
A few things that stand out about that clip is you're hearing Bill Maloogy talk about the raid that was supposedly compromised, although I didn't see any evidence of it. There wasn't anything posted by this correspondent that suggested that this reporter was able to thwart anything done by ICE. But what you're seeing or hearing from him is this admission that, in fact, this person who is engaged in journalism is protected, that there's really nothing criminal that this person is doing. They don't like it. He doesn't like it because he's biased in the other direction. He's as much of an activist as Pablo Manriquez. Honestly, he's just on the complete other end of the issue. But on Fox News, Bill Maloogy is, in fact, someone who, by his standard, he would lose his journalist status just because he has such a formed opinion about the ideas that ICE should not be handcuffed, restrained, nothing should stand in their way, that they should be able to engage in mass deportations without any interference, watchdog efforts, journalism, anything that might hamper and inform the public about abuses, that's nuisances, and also might rise to the level of criminal conduct, according to Bill, as well as Laura. And so you listen to that, though, and the later in the clip, it's clear he's conceding that this is okay, and it is. All Pablo Manriquez is doing, all the migrant insiders doing, is reporting on ICE raids, and they're allowed to receive these tips. And so then you have this idea that this far left activist is being spoken to from within the government. Okay, well, that is already intentionally laying the groundwork for the demonization campaign that will come when we learn the identities of these people who are leakers, if we learn the identity of these people who are leakers. And so we are to immediately think that they are not principled whistleblowers, that there isn't any reason why they are telling the media about the raid in Virginia. I don't know. I don't know if there was anything that crossed the line related to the raid, but there were reporters that have been covering raids all over the country. And because it is a public policy issue, of how ICE is carrying out this mass deportation policy that Donald Trump has made a focus of his second term. And so you've got people who are working with ICE who likely have bureaucratic differences, who likely do not want to see ICE continue down this path for reasons that come from their experience working in this agency. And they are sources for the media. And what you're seeing from Fox News is that they want those people to be rooted out, and they're helping Donald Trump's administration to root out those individuals, spread fear, fuel this chilling effect so that they will be targeted. Let's look at this other clip here.
Lives are on the line, Bill, and I'm going to say this. Pretending you're a reporter to try to avoid your own legal accountability here, that might not work. I mean, it could be considered a fraud in the publication of this. It's a fraud. It's fraudulently identifying yourself and then interfering with federal ICE operations. Americans could very well get killed as a result of this. So the leaker is culpable. This so-called reporter better watch out, because he may be culpable as well. You just don't know how this is going to go down. Bill, as always, you're reporting on this. Thank you so much.
Except Pablo Manriquez is absolutely a reporter and not a fraud. He is engaged in journalism, and the White House granted him a credential to cover the White House this past week.
What up, Internet? It's official. Migrant Insider is now part of the White House Press. We want to thank our colleagues. We want to thank the White House Press team, and especially you, our subscribers, who have made this possible. We are the only immigration news outlet right here in our nation's capital. So please send us your questions, send us your news tips. Let us know what you're hearing. Let us know what you're seeing on the immigration beat in our country, and keep reading Migrant Insider and sharing our links. Thank you so much for getting us this far. We can't wait to keep going with this amazing project.
And Migrant Insider is at migrantinsider.com. If it's what you want to read, you can go there and support it. They are doing reporting on what the Trump administration is doing when it comes to handling immigration. And so this idea that he is a fraud, that he's not really who he is, and that pretending to be something he's not, he could be prosecuted, is absolutely bullshit. There's just no way around it. No other word that is appropriate for it. It's absolute bullshit. And he is even credentialed by the White House to have access and do coverage. And these sources that are coming to him, it is a separate deal. There are laws that they have to follow versus what a reporter has to follow. And all he's guilty of is journalism. We're likely to learn in the next week or so who these people are. There likely will be charges issued. There's more to do on this subject. And in fact, I'm really grateful that Sam Carliner, a past contributor to the Dissenter, he's working on a report for the newsletter right now that will be published on what's happening. A lot of overlap. There's some stuff that I've said here that he's going to cover. He's going to dig into this for the newsletter and make sure we've got some coverage in addition to what I just did with the discussion of those Fox News clips. Well, there you have it. Thank you for tuning in to the Dissenter Weekly. Once again, take a moment, if you like what you see here, to become a subscriber. And also, the podcast is on over a dozen platforms, so take a moment to go there, find it, follow it. You can listen there. There's just an audio version you could listen to if you want to listen there and not bother with YouTube. If you like the YouTube version, great. I'm happy that you have found this show, and take a moment to add a rating. This is new. This is something that I just started doing back in January, hoping to continue this and build it out and get better and better at the kinds of shows we're putting out throughout the year with more guests, and also this kind of focus on the core issues that are really central to the Dissenter newsletter. Those attacks on journalists, that war on whistleblowers that will continue to persist with Donald Trump, of course, being fueled by Donald Trump and his administration. And then you have the secrecy, the rampant secrecy within the administration. And this show, along with the work of the newsletter, is all about that continuity of government, just showing people that from Obama to Trump to Biden to Trump, this is what we have, and this is what needs to be challenged, and this is what we need to fight for if we care about open government, if we care about access to truthful and honest information, if we want to see freedom of the press flourish, if we want to protect journalists and whistleblowers, have solidarity and support for those who are fighting for accountability and justice. We've got to donate and support and fund the media and share articles from the news media that is actually going to resist what we are seeing unfold. If we don't do that, we basically get what we deserve. Thank you. We'll be back next week with another show.